Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So hello everyone and welcome to Dharma Basics. My name's Travis, I facilitate this group. So, as I mentioned, and as we did last week, we'll be focusing more on an extended meditation for the next few weeks, or maybe even till the end of the year, we'll see. We'll be focusing on more of an extended meditation session because, as I've mentioned previously, on average, it takes at least 30 minutes for the most blatant levels of chatter in the mind kind of calm down a bit so we can go a little deeper. So typically when we're doing a meditation here at the Dharma Temple, we don't want to put anyone off by having too long of a meditation. So we usually limit that to anywhere between 20 to 30 minutes. So tonight we'll do a full meditation session, which would be about 45 minutes. Of course, you can meditate for longer if you wanted, but I think 45 is a really solid number to work up to. So that's what we'll be doing. I'll still keep it fresh though. We'll probably do a different type of guided meditation each week. Still pondering what I want to lead tonight. So we'll focus more on a longer meditation. And then there will be time at the end this week, because there was no technical difficulties in the beginning, for questions if anyone has any, whether it be about the meditation that we had just finished or anything Buddhist in general. So maybe by way of comments, I'll throw a few out there and maybe we could decide which one we want to do together. So I was thinking either an elements meditation, going through the different elements of the body, the heat or the fire in the body, the wind throughout the body, the sense of liquidity or the water element throughout the body, and the earth element, the solidity of the body. Just kind of expanding our experience of the body from within beyond just the breath into all of the facets of internal experience. So that's one, an elements meditation. The other one that I was considering is maybe a mudita or a appreciative joy or gratitude meditation. I think that could be beneficial right about now as well. Of course, I like forgiveness meditation and the 5 recollections come to mind, but maybe we'll work up to that for a long session. It could be a bit much. So if you'd like to just comment, whether you want to do an elements meditation or a empathetic joy meditation, or if you want to just sink into the breath some more like we did last week. Okay, I guess it's unanimous. We want to do the elements meditation. So we'll get started with it. So just a few things before we get started with it. The elements, as I had mentioned before, are wind, fire, water, earth, and then space and consciousness. So it's actually 6 elements. With space, it doesn't mean like outer space or cosmic energy or anything like that. It refers to any felt sense of spaciousness in the body. Space is what allows the other elements to mix and intermingle with each other. If there was no space, it'd feel pretty crowded in this body. So space can also refer to the space between like particles and things like that, like how we're mostly empty space. And when the body's kind of uncomfortable, we can tune into that spaciousness. We don't have to focus on the form, we can focus on the space between the form. And these elements are just a way of, they're not necessarily that we're controlling these like magical elements throughout the body. They're more of a vocabulary for the experiences within the body. An experience of heat could be the fire element. An experience of liquidity or coolness could be the water element. Any experience of solidity, like the felt sense of the bones, or where the body's resting in the chair or on the cushion, could be the earth element. And then any sense of dynamic movement is the air element. And then space, as I mentioned, space between form, that which allows the elements to intermingle, which is this. So with an elements meditation, we'll work through, I'm a bit excited because we don't normally get to kind of bring it full circle. With an elements meditation, typically how I've led it is we work through each of the elements and then we just kind of end because it's time consuming. But ideally we work through each of the elements, we expand our awareness to include that felt sense of the body, that aspect of physical sensation. And then we kind of try to be aware of all these levels of elements at once. So we try to have a full awareness of the body, not just in terms of the breath, but in terms of solidity, movement, heat, and coolness. So that's what we'll be doing. I've found personally that the elements are a very enjoyable practice because it's pretty engaging. And throughout this practice, as we're working with the elements, you can, if you're more inclined to the magical, you can imagine that the element is flowing through you to wherever you're focusing, like imagining sunlight or fire flowing through you, warming you up, or icy wind flowing through you, cooling you down, things like that. Yeah, so with that, we'll get started. Closing the eyes and taking 3 deep breaths slowly. Noticing if deep breathing feels good. And if it does, you can keep on breathing in this way. If it doesn't, just switch it up. Maybe even deeper still or more shallow, heavier or lighter. In long and out short, or in short, out long. Just noticing what feels best for the body in this moment. And if you don't feel like experimenting, you can even just pose the question in the mind as to what type of breath would feel the most calming or the most energizing. And just watch how the body responds. And once you've found a comfortable rhythm of breath, you can maintain it and use this breath, this wind element, to soften the body. To relax tension in the body all the way through the in-breath and all the way through the out-breath. Softening the forehead and the area around the eyes. Unclenching the jaw and relaxing the shoulders. breath can be very healing and nourishing. So as you breathe in, you can allow the breath to come in not only to the lungs, but you can allow it to flow in throughout the body, going to wherever it needs to be. Not being rigid or forceful. Wind is the element of freedom. Allow the breath to flow where it needs to be. Abandoning any restrictive ideas about how the breath works. Just allowing it to go where it needs to be. Dissolving tension. And as the wind element fills the body, you may notice the body feels a bit lighter, less weighed down, less burdened. As you continue to dissolve tension throughout it, down the arms and spine, down the legs and out the feet. Allowing yourself to notice how this freedom physically feels. You can begin to set the wind element aside for the time being, the breath aside for the time being, and focus on its opposite, focusing on the solid parts of the body. Noticing first where your feet and your body meet the ground or the chair. Noticing that solid, stable connection. Earth is the element of stability, of grounding. Freedom without stability can become a mess. So let's balance this experience. Focusing first on where your body meets the chair or the floor. And then just like you did with the breath, spreading that sense of solidity through the body. Starting from those most stable parts and imagining that you can trace the bones out from that point. So you can slowly expand your awareness, your felt awareness to the entire skeletal structure. Just resting in this grounded stability. If at any point you notice yourself getting tired or groggy, you can return to working with the wind element. And if while working with the wind element you start to feel lightheaded, you can return to the earth element, learning to balance these two sides of sensation, to find what feels right in this moment. balancing the wind element and the earth element, balancing freedom and stability. Taking note of how it feels. With this balanced found, we can move on from solidity and lightness, earth and wind, on to the dualities of fire and water. Noticing, instead of movement or stability, noticing the parts of the body that are warm and the parts of the body that are cool. Just scanning the body from the crown of the head down to the soles of the feet, noticing the pockets of heat and coolness. And as you survey these pockets, notice if there's any areas that are a little more warm than is comfortable or a little more cool than is comfortable. And see if you can have those temperatures switch places. See if you can send the warm to where the cool is and the cool to where the warm is. Evening them out. If overall you feel too cold right now, you can imagine the warmth in the body as little fires or little balls of sunlight. And you can imagine them spreading to where it feels too cold, or vice versa. Little balls of icy wind or cool water spreading to where it feels too warm. Just working on creating an equilibrium. Where the body is one fairly consistent, comfortable temperature. Learning to balance these dualities. Fire is the element of desire. The Buddha taught that not all desires are bad or unskillful. There are such things as skillful desires. But when we let our fires burn out of control, we're the ones who get singed. And water is the element of change, changing from water to ice, to mist, to steam. And just like water, we're always in flux, and so is the world. Learning to balance these two aspects of ourselves. Acknowledging that much of what we would desire is subject to change, and that the desires themselves are subject to change. And realizing that just because everything's always changing, it doesn't mean there aren't things worth working towards, goals worth having. And with the temperature throughout the body balanced and comfortable, we can move on to space. And personally, for me, the easiest way to focus on space is to begin to focus your awareness or place emphasis on the space between each breath rather than the breath itself. The space between the in and out breath, and the space between the out and in breath. Where the in breath may feel like rising and the out breath feels like falling, the in between breath tends to feel like it's permeating everything. In stillness. You can even hold the image of the body being like a screen door. It seems solid and feels solid, but it's mostly empty space. You could even hold the perception that you're focused on the air in contact with the skin as opposed to the body itself. Whatever works for you. Space is the element of balance. It's what gives room for the other elements to spread and mingle. So from this backdrop of space, you can begin to introduce the elements that we focused on for this past session. Starting with earth, that sense of stability and solidity. Wind, that sense of movement and lightness. Allowing those two to find their balance again. fire and water elements, the sense of warmth and coolness throughout the body. Just building these on top of each other. So you can have a subtle awareness of all of them at once. A really fleshed out experience of the body from within. Solidity, lightness, warmth, coolness, spaciousness. You can slowly begin to open the eyes and stretch if needed. Being careful not to let your mind and your experience go flowing back out with the eyes. Trying to keep it right here in this felt experience. So as I mentioned in the beginning of the class, I won't be giving any kind of talk, but if you either would like to share how that experience of meditation was for you, I am very curious to hear. Or if you have any questions or comments about either the meditation or Buddhism in general, feel free to type them up. So one of the things I'll often refer to this elements meditation as a Goldilocks meditation, because that's what it always reminds me of. Goldilocks went into the cabin and ate the porridges. This porridge is too hot. This porridge is too cold. This porridge is just right. And then she slept on the beds. This bed's too hard. This bed's too soft. This bed's just right. And I find it humorous how perfectly that fits, right? So this elements meditation really is about balancing these basically two pairs of sensations, and then the space is there to make it possible. Or if the body just isn't capable of being comfortable, like you have some kind of illness or something, the space is there as a place to be able to rest in. Learning to tune into the space element is really valuable later in life or in times of illness, because we can tap into something outside of the physical sensation of the body. So if it's not a comfortable place to stay, we don't have to. We can take a break from it. But in terms of these other elements, it's about learning how to balance them. And what's interesting that I always mention is that sensations in the body have a direct relation to thoughts in the mind. Whether they're the hooks of tension that kind of propel that thought into existence and keep it anchored in the mind, or whether it's just a fleeting sensation that causes a thought to occur. So when we work with these aspects, which I haven't really discussed or led the meditation in a way where I talk about how like wind is freedom. It's not being tethered by anything, it's this freedom. Not being tethered by preconceived notions or beliefs or anything like that. Being able to experience things fresh and new. If we didn't have the knowledge that the breath is something that comes in and out of these things called lungs, and it's a process that, keeps the body alive and whatnot. If we didn't have that, the felt experience of the breath isn't just in the lungs. If you really focus on the body as a whole, there's a sense of the entire body expanding and contracting. There's a sense of the body when you're taking deep breaths of it feeling nourished, of it maybe even tingling a bit. So when we drop what we know, what we think we know about the breath, we can experience what the breath actually is or how the breath actually is. And the same with these other elements, like with the bones. Maybe we didn't have a belief that we could get in touch with this sensation of the bone. Bone doesn't have nerve. The nerves are around the bone or whatever biological reasoning we use. But if you notice there, if you focus on the spot that's solid, you can kind of trace that solidity out. You have a lot more layers of internal perception than we realize that we do. And when we don't limit ourselves by what we know to be biologically or scientifically true, we can have a felt experience. And it doesn't matter whether this experience is true or not or whatever, it's what we're feeling in that moment. It's our direct knowledge of how the body feels from within that can be relevant. When we're able to focus on these feelings, these sensations, we're able to correlate them to feelings. As I mentioned, sense of lightness in the body, you feel quite free when you're light. Many of us, or probably all of us, know that when we have something that's been burdening us for so long, mentally exhausting us, when that's finally cleared up or we're finally free from that, we feel incredibly light. So if we want to feel more free, if we feel really burdened, we can kind of synthesize that sense of lightness, that sense of dynamic lightness, using the wind element, using the breath. We can synthesize that sort of stability and strength that we can get from the earth element. And we can do the same with heat and coolness, sense of liquidity and warmth. We can use these sensations of the body from within to kind of synthesize or at least tune our mind to be more inclined with what we want it to be. I believe it was a measure of discernment was being able to think the thoughts you want to think and not have to think the thoughts you don't want to think. And that's a big part of this practice, learning how to tune the body in a way that's an ally to the mind as opposed to an enemy. Yeah. So I think that's all for tonight. Hope you're all doing well, and I'll see you next week. If comfortable, please join palms for a transfer of merit. May any merit gained from tonight's meditation and discussion be dedicated to all those who suffer at this time. May all beings in all directions, without limit or exception, be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. May we all be healthy, safe, joyful, and at ease. Metta karuna mudita peka sahanga teya cetasa chaturisam bharatva viharati samavudaro pavena samadamaro pavena samasangharo pavena sote hantu nirantaram